Homeowners, do not sell your home until you hear this episode. Welcome to the Cisco Estates podcast, guys, formerly known as Inside the Dogfight podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in, and welcome you that you're watching. I want to start first off, I want to start by saying thank you for all the amazing support that I got from episode number 1. It was an amazing turnaround, way more than I expected. So thank you so much for my colleagues, my friends, family, and also clients that, actually a lot of people that I haven't talked to in a while reached out to me and they're like, hey man, this is so you. We see the passion behind it. Keep doing it. This is very informative, and thank you so much. So just so you guys know, I will be posting bi-weekly, okay? You're gonna see a link also on my personal Cisco Estates Instagram account, and also on the podcast Cisco Estates podcast Instagram account. It's on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook for the moment. All right, guys. So thanks again. I just wanted to start off like that. Thanks again for all the amazing support and all the comments. I think on TikTok I got to like 1,500 like first video, so not too shabby, not too shabby. So thank you guys so much. All right, let's get into the title. So today's title is Do Not Sell and Put Your House in the Market Until You Watch This Episode. So today is going to be more for sellers, right? Now, it's for everyone. If you're a buyer and you want to, you're thinking about selling, or someone that wants to sell, or you just want to, get more information. So when the time comes to sell, you're more informed. So either way, if you're just trying to learn something, this is for you. Okay, so what do I mean by that, guys? Okay, well, it's going to be split into two, right? An A and B. So do not put my house in the market until I know what, Cisco. Okay, let's start with the first one. Sellers and realtors. This is for realtors as well, okay? Be more careful with pricing. Right now, we have to be even more careful with the prices of how much we list a home. Okay. Now, why? If you think you're going to get crazy offers, and I'm talking to you seller, like before, or even you realtor, if you're saying that, promising that to your seller, you might want to watch out, because you're not going to get the crazy amount of offers that we were getting before, right? So that's number one. Now, everybody knew that this was going to happen, first of all, right? So everybody that at least I know that is full-time in this, and they do this on the regular, see, nothing against part-timers, nothing against part-time realtors or part-time lenders. It's just that, like it or not, guys, when you're more full-time, you're more sensitive to the changes that are happening on a weekly basis, right? So everybody knew this was going to happen. There was going to be a correction in the market, okay? Now, what's happening is that inventory is going to start rising slowly, okay? Just more inventory overall. Right? Spring, summer, everybody knows that those are the hottest seasons in real estate. Also, construction is kind of starting again, right? And like it or not, I believe, right, that there's going to be some people that are going to have to sell their home because they're having a tough time, okay? So inventory, there's going to be more inventory. And then now there's less buyers. Right. So less buyers. And I have my notes here because I want to make sure that I don't miss anything. So now there's going to be more inventory that's going to rise slowly, and there's going to be less buyers. Now, the buyers that are left, and I talked about buyers on my last episode, on episode number 1. So go check that out if you haven't seen it yet. But the buyers now that are left. So I believe that half the buyers are gone. Now, which half of the buyers are gone? The ones that were just trying to buy because the interest rates were low, not because they were trying to get into a home, right? So 50% of the buyers are out. The ones that just wanted to get the 2, 3, and 4% interest rates, the ones that were buying more investment properties. Now buyers are left, but the ones that actually need and want a home, right? So let's talk about those buyers for a sec. You need to understand this, seller, is that the buyers are now going to be more careful. They're going to be way more careful in what they get into, right? So the amount of buyers that are left, now they're dealing with 5% interest rates, 6% interest rates, and who knows where it's going to get to, right? Especially, because in a way higher interest rates is how you combat stagflation, okay? So those buyers are left in the market. They're going to be way more careful. They're going to make sure that what they get into fills more of their check boxes. And then also, they're going to have to revisit now their loan pre-qualification. They have to revisit now their loan pre-approval. They have to sit down with the lender and go over, hey, man, like I know I was pre-approved at this amount 4 months ago. Where am I at now? Right? So they're going to be way more careful, and the way they submit offers now, it's not going to be the same as 4, 5, 6 months ago, especially during the pandemic. Okay, so that's number one. So just be sellers and realtors, be more mindful. We're going to have to be way more careful the way we price properties. Now, the last thing about this, and this is note A, right? You're going to start seeing prices go down a little bit, but it's important that the reasons of why prices go down, it's numerous of factors. It's never just one thing. It's a bunch of things combined. So that's important for you to understand. But the number one reason, I feel like the very first reason of why prices start going down just a little bit, right, is because of the sellers and the realtors that are not in tune with what's going on, and they're overpricing properties. What do I mean by that? I see this happen a lot. I see realtors do this a lot, and I see even sellers. Like I had a couple appointments this week with sellers, and this is something that I had to let them know. And this is what happens. Say, for example, we get a house, right, that you put it on the market for $500,000. You put the house and you put it for $500,000. And a buyer comes in and he offers $550,000. And now it sells for $550,000. So original asking price was $500,000, example, and now it sells for $550,000. Well, a seller and a realtor that's not in tune with what's going on, he's going to come and say, okay, I'm going to list this other one that's the same thing. And if that one sold for $550,000, then I'm going to put this one at $570,000 because I'm going to put it a month from now. So everything's going to continue to go up. And that's where the mistake happens, is that, yes, during the pandemic, there was a stretch and everything was overbidding, right? But now it's not the same market. Episode number 1, I talked about a shift happening, and we need to adjust to the shifts. Those are our primary responsibilities. That's what I do with my clients. I fill them in what's happening in the market and how we should respond, right? So that's the number one. For example, that example, it's a mistake if we overprice thinking that everything is going to go insanely high, and it's not. And then now that property that I put for $570,000, it's 2 weeks, a month on the market. Now I have to go and price reduction to $550,000. You know, so this is where we have to be in tune, and we have to be aware of how the interest rates are changing the market. And now the buyers are left, because understand something, there's always going to be buyers. Doesn't matter what happens with the economy. There's always going to be buyers. There's always going to be sellers. But depending on the type of the climate of the real estate market, it's how buyers and sellers are going to think, right? So that's point A. Let's move on to point B. Sales process timeline. Sellers, do not sell your home until you listen to this. The sales process timeline. Now, this is something that I educate and I talk to with all my clients, all my sellers. I'm like, hey, it's important for you to understand what these 5 phases are. So it's the phases of you selling your home, okay? From phase number 1 all the way to closing escrow, okay? So again, if you're thinking about selling or know someone, or you just want to learn a little bit more about the process of selling a home, of being a homeowner, this is going to be very educational for you. Okay, so let's start with phase number 1. Phase number 1, I like to call it discovery questions. This is where I initially have a consultation with the seller, right? And it's more to analyze the reason and the motive to sell. What's your reason? What's the motive? There has to be a strong enough reason and motive, especially now, guys. Well, what do you mean by that, Cisco? Well, it's during the pandemic, there was a lot of sellers that were just selling because they wanted crazy offers and they wanted an insane offer, overpriced offer for their home. If that's the reason now, I don't know, this may not be the same market for you. You may not, I feel like that train has gone, right? So now the reasons should be, there's always going to be sellers selling. And the reasons typically are, hey, well, I'm trying to get something bigger. I just have to. I just got another baby on the way, or some of my family is going to come and we're all going to, live together. So I have to get something bigger. Or there's always going to be people downsizing. Hey, Cisco, I got a lot of clients like this. Hey, I bought this big house for my kids and now my kids moved on. Now they're in college or whatever. And now it's just overkill. Now we're trying to downsize. Or there's always going to be sellers moving out of state or going to another city. They're, getting a different job. So those are good reasons to sell, right? And so it's still a great market for you. Now, so on phase one, it's discovery questions. This is where I get to know the seller. This is where I get to know you. And I'm like, hey, what's your reason? What's your motive to sell? Also, what price do you have in mind? And it's so important that if they have a price in mind, I always ask, okay, that is based on what? The price that you have in mind is based on what? And I hope it's not, something I hear all the time. Well, it's because on Zillow estimate, right? Redfin or Realtor. And it's important for you to realize that you never want to go off that. You never want to go off that. Why? Because if you notice, every app, Realtor.com, Redfin, and Zillow, they're all three going to give you different estimates. You don't believe me? Check your address right now. Check all three estimates. They're going to give you different ones. And sometimes they're going to be a difference of $10, $15, $20, $30 to $40,000, right? So this is where we have to come in as professionals and really do comparable data based on facts, based on the current real estate market, not on where it was 6 months ago, especially in a city like LA, guys. It moves quick. Real estate moves so quick. And in California and LA, in big cities, right? Like San Francisco, Austin, Dallas, Texas, New York. So real estate moves, it's changing very quickly, right? So that's number one. And so the discovery questions even go into, okay, well, is the home that you're going to sell, is it going to be vacant, right? So it's important to understand too that is the best case scenario. When your home is vacant, that is where you're going to maximize the amount of money, right? Those are the cleanest properties out there on the market. And those are the ones that sell the quickest, okay? So number two is seller occupied. If the properties are seller occupied, understand that once a property is seller occupied, and especially if it's contingent on you buying another property, okay, well, that, like it or not, makes it a little bit more complicated. And, it's more risk involved, right? So you're not going to get the same amount of offers or high offers that you will get if your property was vacant. The third one, if it's tenant occupied, right? And let's get a little bit into the tenant occupied. If it's a tenant occupied, it just happened to me with another client that it turns out his tenant was Section 8. So this is still under everything under discovery questions, right? Like, so what's your reason to sell? What price do you have in mind? Is the property going to be vacant? Is it going to be seller occupied? Or is it contingent on you finding something else? Is there a tenant in there? Oh, there is? Okay, is it Section 8? Because that changes all the rules. For example, here in California, we know that when a tenant is month to month, 1 year, they've been there for less than 1 year, you can give them a 30-day notice. If they've been there for more than a year, you can give them the 60-day notice to vacate. But if it's Section 8, it's 90 days. So this is the discovery questions is extremely important, and it's phase number one, where we get to know more about you, and just make sure that's where the planning starts, okay? Let's go into phase two. This is the logistic preparations. This is what I like to call all the work behind the curtain before there's a show and the curtains get opened up and the show gets revealed. This is all the work that's happening behind closed doors, behind the scenes, behind the curtains, logistical preparations. Okay, what does that mean? All right. Well, the number one thing, guys, by phase 2, this is where an agreement happens between the seller and the realtor, where the seller is giving the realtor, hey, I'm giving you authority to go to work for me, right? Now, this is important that the agreement has to happen first, because that's where, hey, we're both in unison agreeing that we're going to both work for each other, that I'm going to work for you, Mr. Seller. So once that gets executed and signed, it's important to understand that this agreement is between the owners, the property owners and the realtor or realtors, right? What do you do there? The logistical paperwork. This is a period, and phase 2 is extremely important, okay? Because on phase 2, I would say, look, phase 1 and phase 2 are the most important phases in selling a property. It's all the preparation. And I feel like this is where people don't do enough work and they rush things, and sellers think or realtors think like, hey, just putting things on the market and putting a price and all I have to do is take pictures. No, there's a lot of work that has to be done. Phase 2, get all the logistical paperwork ready. What does that mean? Okay, there's a period where we minimize risks and any potential negative surprises. One thing I tell my clients is like, look, on phase 2, this is where we do things like the payoff, the SI, the statement of information form, the prelim where we check the APN, where we check for any litigations, where we check for any open cases, lawsuits, liens, hidden, silent, and second loans, right? Now, what's a payoff? A payoff is when we find out an exact amount by the cent how much you owe still on the property, if you still owe. Until we don't run that, right, I can't give you an exact estimate of how much you're going to net after you sell. Second one, the statement of information. This is where we check that and it's important that we don't check the names. We run the social security, where we make sure that you don't have any child supports delinquencies, or you don't have any lawsuits or any liens or litigations, right, against your social security. Something happened too. An example of this is I had a client a couple months ago where he put his house on the market. He's like, hey, help me out. I'm like, sure. I'm like, and we were in phase 2. I'm like, hey, Mr. Seller, I want to make sure that we find out the payoff, how much you owe, an exact amount by the penny. We need to find that out. We also need to do a statement of information to make sure that you're clean. You know, there's no open litigations or anything against yourself, your social security, before we move on, right? And we did that. And then my title rep calls me and she's like, hey, there's child support delinquency on your client. I'm like, really? He's like, yeah, because now that's going to change the ball game a little bit. So again, guys, phase 2, it's about minimizing risks and surprises along the way. We don't want surprises along the way, right? So I go back to my client. I'm like, hey, this, and that. Do you owe child support? And he's like, no, I don't at all. So I go back to my title rep. I'm like, hey, can you double check? She double checked. And then thank God she called me and she's like, hey, you know what? Turns out it was somebody else, you know, but it was tied into the property for some reason. So this is what phase 2 is for, okay? Where we run the payoff, the SI, the prelim, okay? The preliminary report, that's where we make sure that there's no litigations or anything like that against the property too, okay? And it doesn't go by address. It goes by APN number. What is APN number? Every property has an APN number. An APN number is like the fingerprints of that property. It's the social security of that property. Okay. So that is phase 2. Okay. After phase 2, once there's an agreement and all the logistical documentation preparation is happening, making sure that, you know, there's no risk, minimizing the risks and also any negative surprises, then we move into phase 3. Phase 3 is where we prep for the marketing, right? So by the time, and what is phase 3? That is where the work that goes in before the big reveal of the house. So phase 3, we still haven't put the property on the market yet. Phase 3 is where we take professional pictures. and list the property, where we take drone shots, video shots, right? Now, it's really important, guys, phase 3, because I'm sure we've all seen properties out there that are great properties, but they have horrible pictures, horrible videos. They have no videos, no drone pictures, no drone videos, horrible pictures where it's a realtor taking a picture with his camera, and like it or not, guys, that is a huge deal when you put a house on the market. Why? Well, especially now, we have to appeal to our market, right? So who's the generation right now that's going to start buying? And I can tell you this because half of my clients are from this generation, are the millennials. The millennials are right now in their older 20s or they're in their 30s, and the millennials are the ones that are going to start now buying. So they're the first timers right now that they're buying and they're buying. Now, it's been the lowest generation in history that have bought, but they're going to start buying the ones that they can. Now, it's important to know that millennials like myself, I'm a millennial, we go off a lot by social media. We go a lot about videos and the pictures and the marketing, right? So it appeals to us a lot as a generation. So it's important on phase 3 to invest in professional pictures, to invest in professional drone videos and footages and all of that, and for preparation for the big reveal. So that's phase 3, guys. Phase 4, which is marketing the property. This is the big reveal. This is where we finally put your house on the market. Now think of everything that we've talked about so far. It's a lot of work before we put the house on the market. At least the good realtors out there are going to do their due diligence, make sure all the ducks are lined up in a row, make sure everything is airtight, make sure we did everything to minimize the risk as much as we can, and so there aren't any negative surprises along the way. Why? As a protection for you. As a protection for you as a client. Because it's extremely important, guys. Understand that I always tell my clients, look, my goal is for you to walk away with the most amount of money, right? I mean, I'm representing the seller. That's the whole point. For you to net the most amount of money in your pocket, right? But my second goal, and this is what I tell them, is to do it the right way, to protect the client, to protect the seller, right? Because there's a lot of, I've heard of nightmare escrows where they rushed into putting the house on the market. They rushed into, you want to sell it, take pictures, take videos and everything. And they didn't do none of this preparation. And along the way, it turns out that there's a litigation, there's a demand, there's, there's a lien, there's a second lien, there's a second loan. Now it doesn't make sense anymore. And now the seller's put in a place where, you know what, I can't sell. And then now you're under contract with the buyer. So that's where disasters happen. Okay. So phase 4 is the big reveal. That is where I market the property at over 200 websites, put it on all the apps out there. We put it on the MLS. And the goal of phase 4 is simple, guys, is the more buyers see your property, the more offers, leading to more money in your pocket. So phase 4 is pretty simple. Okay. Let's get into phase 5. Phase 5, negotiate and open escrow. So once we do the big reveal and we put the property in the market, it's everywhere, websites, it's worldwide. I put it in websites where everybody in the world can see your listing. We do door knocking, we do open houses, we do showings, right? So all of that, mailers, social media. So phase 5 is where now we choose the strongest offer. And it's important to know that if you notice, I'm not saying the highest offer. I'm saying the strongest offer. There's a difference, right? So you never want to go off by just price. You want to go off also by terms in the contract, by how many days in escrow, right? So this is where, again, guys, experience and an experienced realtor with an attention to detail comes in, where he's going to be able to tell you, hey, Mr. Seller, Mrs. Seller, I know this offer is the highest priced one, but here's the thing. I still can't get a hold of his realtor. The lender has not called me back. They're asking for a lot of days of contingency. They're going to ask for repairs. They're going to ask for this. They're going to ask for that, right? So even though it's the highest price, but already everything else, it's a lot of red flags, right? Now, say there's another offer that's the second highest, but that one, the realtor and the lender have been communicative. They've responded quickly. They're like, hey, Cisco, this is, a little background about my client. They're this, and that. Talk to the lender. We talk to the lender. Are they approved? What do they do for a living? What do they do for work? What's their credit score? So this is what makes the strong offer, right? So then, and this is where, we lay out the options, but it's completely and entirely up to you as a seller, okay? Then you open escrow, you negotiate, right? And I want to pause here for a second, because it happened to me I would say 2 years ago. It's important to know that before you open escrow, before you enter an agreement with the buyer, you accept his contract, his what do you call it? The RPA, right? It's important that before that, you are in agreement with your realtor, right? So say you're in agreement with me. You give him the authorization to go to work for you. Okay. But as soon as you choose a buyer's offer and it gets executed, so it gets signed by both parties, right? Now you're in contract, not with me, but with the buyer. Now you're in contract with him, right? So once the buyer removes all contingencies, understand, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, that you cannot cancel, because now you're under contract with the buyer directly. I just wanted to make a note of that, because it happened to me 2 years ago, where a seller wanted to cancel after the buyer already had removed all contingencies. And can you cancel? Yeah, if the buyer chooses to let you go and not pursue and not, sue you in a sense, but they have every right to sue you after. So it's just important for you to know the timeline. So phase 5 is when you negotiate an open escrow. You negotiate any repairs, appraisals, termites, or any other contingency along the way. And once all contingencies have been removed, that is when you have a successful closing. All right. That is when you have a successful closing. And so those are the 5 phases, guys. It's important for you to know. If you're thinking about selling, or you're gonna sell, either now or in the immediate future, but it's important to know the process. It's important to know what you're getting yourself into, the timeline, the steps, the preparation that comes. Most of the work comes before putting the house on the market. Once you put on the market, it's easy after that, right? Until you get the offers, and then the realtor kind of has to do their job and kind of go back and forth with the offers. But most of the work is before. So make sure that you do your due diligence. Make sure that you choose a realtor like myself, that I will do all the preparation and make sure everything's airtight and minimize the risk as much as we can, so we won't get any surprises along the way. Okay, so these are the 5 phases of the sales process timeline. And thank you so much, guys, for watching. If you made it this far, as a podcast, it is the 2nd episode. We're going to get better every time. That's the whole point. Thank you so much for tuning in. And also DM me or comment if you have any questions, any feedback, okay, any way that we can improve. Or if you have questions that you want answered, comment, okay, on YouTube, on wherever you see the video, comment some questions and I can address them on the 3rd episode. Okay, guys, remember that strategy plus execution equals success. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you on the next one.